In this video, we'll have a look at a person paying off a loan, and we'll look at how much interest they pay and how long it takes to actually pay off that loan. We'll do it via a table, and we'll also look at the financial application on the Casio Classpad, in particular the part called amortization. So here is our question. It's suggested that you pause here and identify the key parts that we're going to use to solve the problem. So we can see the key information here that we have a certain amount being borrowed, or the principal or the loan, $20,000. The interest rate is at 12% per annum, and that's going to be calculated monthly. And on top of that, there are repayments being made of $600 every month. So if we're going to use a table, we want to break that down to each month, and we know that 12% per year divided by 12 will give us the interest rate per month, which is 1% per month. So we can do calculations based on that. So here's our table. We've got the amount owing, we've got the interest that we need to calculate, and at 1% per month in the first instance, that'll come to $200. Now our repayments are consistent. They're $600 every month. And the final balance will be the amount we owed originally, plus the interest, which actually increases the loan, and then we subtract the $600 we've paid to try and reduce the loan. So our balance after 1 month is $19,600. That becomes our amount owing at the beginning of the second month. So we repeat the calculation for interest, which is 1% in this case of $19,600, which is $196. We again have a repayment of $600, and our balance is the amount we owed plus $196 minus the repayment of $600. And this time that comes to a value of $19,196. If we continue to repeat that, our first 5 months can be seen in this diagram. Now we could continue that on a spreadsheet or going through and doing it manually until we see that that loan reduces to $0. So it's certainly a simplistic way of doing it, but it can be quite time consuming. Let's have a look at how we do it on the financial application on the Casio Classpad. Before we do that, it would be wise just to review the initial question and make sure that you have the values that are critical, such as the amount being borrowed, the interest rate, and the repayments, which is $600 per month. We can use our amortization app to actually go through and work out the total amount of interest paid. But before we do that, let's use the compound interest part of the financial program on the Classpad to determine how many payments were made to pay off this loan. The first box N represents the number of installments or payments, but we don't know this because that's what we're trying to actually find. What we do know is that the annual interest rate is 12% per annum. We also know that we're taking a loan of $20,000. Now, because we're actually borrowing the money, we're putting it into our pocket. So that means that we have possession of the money. So we'll call that positive $20,000. As far as the payments are concerned, that's coming out of our pocket back towards the bank or financial institution. So that's negative $600. We're actually losing it. We want the loan to be paid off, so the future value, FV, will be 0. Now we're making payments monthly, so that's 12 times per year for PY, and the interest is also being calculated monthly, so that's 12 times per year for CY. Now when we do that, we find out that it's going to take 40.7 payments for Jai to pay off the loan. Of course, we're paying this off at the end of each month, so effectively that's 41 payments. It's just that the last one won't be for a full $600. So when we use the amortization app, what we want to do is express PM1 and PM2 as the time frame that we're looking at to determine how much we pay off in terms of interest. So PM1 is 1 and PM2 is 41 for our last payment. All the other values in between, such as I and PV for present value, they stay the same. If we go to the second last line, we can see the symbol sum or sigma int, which is the sum of all the interest. In this case, it comes to $4,449 and rounded off to 91 cents. This is the total interest that Jai paid throughout the course of the loan. So let's have a look at how we justify the total interest paid. One thing to notice is that the last payment of the 41 payments is not $600. It's $150.09 less than that. And when we have a closer look at the amortization app, we'll see how we can determine that. We know that Jai makes 41 payments, and we can say 41 lots of 600, but in fact the last one wasn't as much as 600. he ended up paying, if we did pay $600, $150.09 too much. So we're going to take that off the repayments. But we're also going to take off $20,000 because that was money that he actually did owe. The interest is the extra money. So in this case, the extra money comes to $4,449.91, just as the amortization app told us. Now for interest, let's have a look at the other aspects of the amortization app and see what information it actually gives us. When we press balance, we get negative $150.09. So that's telling us that we've paid off too much because we want the future value to be zero. Essentially, our last payment doesn't need to be $600. It can be $150.09 less than that. The next box, which is INT, or short for interest, that tells us the interest that we had to pay on our first payment. So going back to the start of our table. PRN is basically how much of the principal in our first payment goes off towards paying off the loan. Now we paid $600, but because $200 of that is lost in interest, we're effectively only paying off $400 of our loan. So those three buttons we just looked at, balance, interest, and PRN, probably don't have a lot of impact on most questions that are being asked in this topic. As we saw before, the sum of int, the second last row, gives us the total amount of interest paid across the course of the loan. The last entry, which is sum of PRN, indicates the amount of money we've paid back out of our loan of $20,000. In this case, it comes to $20,150.09, and that's because under this organisation of the table, our last payment is still $600. So all being well, the sum of principal should equal $20,000. In other words, you've effectively paid off your loan.